after about 250 years of him not putting his socks in the hamper, she's gonna wish she had a steak. Like, like oh yeah, love triangles. I don't know. So here's like, I was thinking about this because I knew we were going to talk about it. So I've been rolling it over in my head, and I decided like I used to just really like hate love triangles just because I don't know why, just why. Like most of the ones that I read never really contributed to the story very well. It was just this person who has two people who like her, and then one does something really awful. So you're left with this other choice, like, yay, thanks for picking me because I didn't murder your parents or something. But
or fall in love with your infant daughter. But we'll talk about that another time.
Oh, I wasn't gonna bring that book into it, but yeah. Imprinting on your infant daughter, because that's definitely the way, that's the way to win a mom's heart. But like I was thinking too when I was considering, like, did I ever do the things that I hate about love triangles in my books? And I realized that I did, like, a lot. So now I'm rethinking every book I ever wrote. And are there love triangles, and are they moving the story along, or are they just there because that's what I'm supposed to put in a young adult novel?
Or maybe, it's different when you do them yourself because you understand the characters and like both the characters from the start, or already know what your plan is for which one. But I saw a thing once, a whole discussion about love triangles. They seem to be a pretty divisive trope where some people love them and some people hate them. But they're definitely one of those tropes that, like, for YA, it's the thing that makes people go, those books, right? Mm-hmm. I think though, like, I saw this really lofty discussion that was arguing that the purpose of a love triangle really isn't even about the characters. It's about the main character having to choose between two ideologies or two possible versions of herself or her future. And so when I looked at it from that perspective, it makes it interesting because, if you look at something like The Hunger Games,
yeah,
she's basically choosing between this life of war and rebellion and this life of trying to make change in a subtler way, a more like, obviously PETA still wasn't embracing the Capitol. He was still rebelling, but he was doing it in a more peaceful way.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that, her attempt, if that was what she was choosing between, didn't exactly go as planned for any of them. But in the end, Gale almost becomes like this angry person, whereas PETA, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read the full series.
Oh yeah. We should put that in the
beginning. So I'll skirt around this one. PETA changes as a person immensely. The circumstances of their relationship change immensely. And yet he's still the one that she chooses to be with, because the version of herself who she was with him was, I think, more of who she wanted to be than who she was when she was with Gale, theoretically.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's an interesting way of looking at it, because it becomes, then you have to ask, like, I mean, in real life relationships, are we just choosing who we're with because of who we are with them, or is it about the other person? It becomes very philosophical.
I mean, yeah, like when I think back, over past relationships, there were definitely some that stick out where I didn't like who I was when I was with that person, and most definitely would not have chosen that person if there was another option. I guess there always is the option of just not being with someone, but like that was a good example. Like the whole PETA sort of representing like this peaceful, quiet future that she wanted, because he never really was a very imposing person. The thing about that particular example that I didn't like was that, Gale became the rebellion. The rebellion was everything that he wanted, and it was his sole life at that point. Almost made it where he was a bad guy, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, it makes it easy to choose the peaceful person when you don't really want to be doing this fight to begin with. I don't like it when they write it as a very easy, I want it to hurt. I want this character to have such a hard time choosing between these two people that it's literally an extremely divisive situation in the book where, like, you know, trying to figure out how I'm trying to, how I'm trying to say what I'm trying to say. I don't want it to be so easy for me to choose. It was easy for me to choose Peeta because, like, you know, he's this guy. He's what you want it to be after the rebellion. Like, he's this peaceful, quiet future, and Gale is never going to be peaceful and quiet even after the rebellion. Like, you get this idea that he's just going to keep looking for trouble. And
yeah, that makes
I
sense.
want it to be so hard to choose between these people because they're both great in different ways. I cannot stand when I'm reading a book and I get drawn into this relationship with one character, and then the next character comes along, and you start to think, well, maybe this person might be a little better for her, but this one's still just as good. And then all of a sudden, it's like the author just decides they can't figure out who they want the character to be with, so they just have one of the other characters do something completely unforgivable. And now it's an easy option.
Yeah.
Me, like, if that's how you're gonna write it, don't write it. Just don't write it. Just have a love triangle, because I don't want to hate a character that you spent, especially if it's in a series, and then I end up hating this character in book 30. You've made me, like, love this character for 2 books, and then they just do something completely horrible, and now I have to hate them.
Yeah,
like,
that makes sense. For me though, I actually kind of hate the sad angst of, like, they're both great people, but you have to break one of their hearts. Like, that's, I mean, I love it. I guess as a reader, it's like that hate love thing where you're like, I hate this, but I'm gonna keep reading because it's hooked me. As an author, I would absolutely do it because but yeah, that's what we do. But to me, the most satisfying ones. Okay, so as much as I knock, and we're going to knock Twilight in our discussions.
Yeah.
There are things I truly love about that series, and clearly she did some things really well because it was super, super popular, is still super popular. One of the things that I think she did well, and don't like crucify me yet, because I'm gonna say this and you're gonna be like, what? One of the things I think she did well on a base level is finding a way to resolve the love triangle that didn't require one of them just becoming irredeemable. It was a satisfying ending to the love triangle because he ended up happy. She didn't have to break his heart, and she ended up happy. And if you can set the whole weird demon baby imprint thing aside, they both ended up happy. And nobody's heart was broken, and that was kind of nice. But you really do have to set aside the bizarre icky feelings of the whole.
To make that feel okay. Especially now I read this series before I had a child, and I was like, oh, that's a little weird. Mm-hmm. But after I had a child, I'm like, the Bella should really want to rip your throat out. Like, there's no way around that. Like, you are having, like, and then the very fact that in the book she had to mention that, like, it's not a weird sort of attraction. It's just like, I'm like, okay, so you knew this was not okay when you wrote it.
This is where I think she had the stroke of brilliance of making Edward able to read people's thoughts, because there were several times in the book where, had he not been able to say, I can see his thoughts and it's not weird, it absolutely would have been really weird.
Like, I don't know. As a mom, I still think I'd be like, look, you're my friend, but we can't have this. But I was actually talking to one of my friends yesterday about letdowns in books, and this one actually is going to would cross over into another topic we can talk about another time, but it's not really like See, sometimes I think of love triangles too, as not necessarily three people, but one person with a love interest that maybe isn't the best thing for them, and then their freedom being this other option that they just toy with from time to time, but they never actually realize, okay,
So, like
I
choosing
can
themselves as the other, yeah.
and I hate bringing up the Divergent series. We're just gonna have to let people know we're gonna be spoiling the crap out of everything, but
yeah, maybe we'll do a disclaimer at the beginning of this video.
So
if
like
you have not read these books, proceed with caution.
But like for 4, like I always kind of felt like he was stuck in this love triangle between like what he really deserved for his life and this inexplicable pull he had to Triss, who was really never going to be good for him in the end. Like, I know that's probably not a popular theory, and I'm probably going to get hate mail comments on this video for that, but honestly, I really wanted him to tell her to go jump off a bridge. Like, he just, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like this catastrophe. I'm like, you can just choose yourself. Like, you don't have to be in this relationship. You can choose. There is another point on this triangle, and it's to happily be alone until the war is over and not try to.
I refuse to be a triangle. I'm going
to be the triangle or
be my own point of origin over there.
I'm really bad at writing love shapes that are bigger than triangles.
Like, I am too. I'm like, I'm gonna write a love triangle in this book, and then like in our collab, again, mild spoiler alert, there was supposed to be 2 love interests, and I just kept throwing in. I didn't mean to, but I ended up with a love triangle on my side. I don't even know. That book got complicated.
I had like a tetrahedron or something going on.
Yeah. Well, and it was the same thing with the Stalker series that I started on Wattpad. Like, I didn't know what to call that one. I was like, this is like a love. It's not a shape that exists.
It's like an octagon of unequal proportions.
Like a 3-dimensional, because there were points that connected to themselves. It's some sort of a 3D object. That's what that is.
But the thing is, I think for me, like when I do that, I think it's like when we did our collaboration. Mm-hmm. I think for me with Grace, it was me exploring Grace's personality and seeing which character made her the best version of her, which we talked about earlier. But
yeah, so I mean that's interesting because it's like you were doing that just intuitively anyway.
Yeah, and it may or may not have been like the best way to feel out my character. I think it worked out okay in our collaboration, but I really do think like I was kind of floundering with her. Like she didn't really know herself very well, so I didn't know her very well. And I think by the time she was like on to boy number 3, she was trying to like kind of starting to figure out, okay, so this is good, this is good, this is good. Let's pull it all together and put them in one person who's not even from this planet. So
I think mine was a similar thing, except it was my male characters that I didn't really feel like I had a good grasp on yet. So I had the one that I intended to be broody, and he just became this ridiculous, adorable dork. And then, so I tried to throw in another character who was like, well, this one can be the broody guy. We'll just throw him in. But he wasn't even supposed to be there. And so then I was like, well, how do I exit him? Eventually. So I had to figure that out. And then there was the karaoke battle, which was completely unplanned and just emerged. Like,
it was great.
Battle for her honor. Yeah, so I guess when I plan a love triangle, if I plan it ahead of time, I'm trying to think if I've ever actually intentionally planned one or if they just happen.
I never plan them. Even with the work in progress that you read that I won't name aloud just yet because I'm not ready to announce it. The brothers, like I had a hard time picking between the brothers which one was going to be the best fit for that situation, because I already knew everything there was to know about both of those brothers, but that information had not even presented in the story. So I really had to kind of balance with figuring out my female main character, like where's she going in the story and who's going to be the one to get her there. And like, hopefully I picked the right. I think I picked the right one. But I like going into that when I really started doing it, I really wasn't positive which way I was going to go with that. So I knew there would be a little bit of like a blurry triangle for a while. But that I think that's the only intentional one that I ever really did, because our collaboration wasn't ever meant to be. Ex-boyfriend was never meant to stick around. He was meant to skitter off somewhere, and then he just kind of hung around and had a brother, and you know, things kind of spiraled from there.
See, it's funny when you were saying that, because as you were talking, I realized I have intentionally planned a love triangle, but when I intentionally plan them, I do the opposite. I know exactly which one I'm planning for my character to be with. And then it's like, because I did it in the Lex Chronicles. I didn't think about that, but like, it wasn't an intention.
You did in the Lex Chronicles, because for that first book and a half, I was really worried about how that was going.
But see, it's almost like I don't even think about it, because in my mind, I know exactly how. I'm like, oh yeah, this is just part of the drama of the story, but I know where it's going. So when I plan them ahead of time, it's like the messy part to me is the in between of like figuring out the dynamics of how that's all going to play out, because I usually already know the choice that they're going to make, because in my mind I know exactly who they're supposed to be with. When I was writing the Stalker book, it was because it was like a mystery of figuring out who the secret admirer was. That one I sort of doubted. I started to doubt myself, because I was writing it on Wattpad, and I knew who the secret admirer was going to be. I had it all planned out. I had every message planned out. And then I would get the reader comments, and some of them would be guessing correctly. Some were guessing correctly, and some were guessing incorrectly, but so passionately that I was like, well, maybe I chose the wrong person for her to be.
Are you talking about me?
Well, yes, you were one of them, who was very determined about who she should be with. But yeah, so then I'm like doubting. I'm like, man, I really, really hope that when they get to the end, they're not just gonna like scream at me and be all mad. But yeah, I think when I do plan them, I think I know, for the most part, I know. Maybe I would. I don't know if I would change my mind if I needed to. Maybe. I do. One of the books that I am working on for the future has a love triangle. Actually, two of them of my future projects have love triangles planned into them. But again, I sort of already know which way it's going to go, because and for me, I think that's because I kind of am viewing it as like, this is the life that my character would be happy in. And I know that. So that's what everything is building toward that. There just might be a lot of painful stuff that's going to have to happen in between.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Like I'm trying to think of what the name of this stinking book is now. Okay, that thought just fluttered away. But yeah, like I think that even if I don't plan on putting a love triangle, it always ends up being part of my tension. I don't know, even if it's just a little bit, like just something that maybe makes the main character doubt something a little bit. Like I think like when I wrote the Yellow Note, which is like a secret admirer type story, like yours was, when you know that, but I always knew from the beginning who that person was going to be. But I wrote this book as her going through all 4 years of high school. So I was like, well, it can't just be that she never dates anybody, she never has interactions with other people. Like, she's going to experience life, even if there's this other person that she's ultimately going to end up with.
Right.
To start writing through this, I'm like, I actually really like the dynamic of her with this person too bad, I gotta break his heart. I had already decided and written so much of the book to lean towards this person, but honestly, like if I could rewrite that book, I could definitely see rewriting it with any of the other love interests that she had as being the end game for her. So
Yeah.
kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where like I don't mind a love triangle or anything like that if it's like a difficult decision. Like it really needs to be something that keeps the character up at night, worrying about did I make the right choice, or you know, I hate when it's so black and white. Like this character is clearly horrible, terrible, evil, no good, very bad, and this person's like this shining angel, and then of course the character always picks the bad one, gets her heart broken, and then picks the good one. So like the light bulb didn't go off before that. And I've read like a lot of like I've DNR'd the heck out of like 20, 25 young adult books lately, because like you can tell from the very beginning, like in the first couple of chapters, that this main character is not going to have a flipping clue about what she needs to do. Like I don't even know how to explain what I'm trying to say. Like I will DNR a book like nobody's business if I can tell from the very beginning that this character is going to involve herself in the most horrific love triangle known to man and make all like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I'm trying to think of the name of this book. I wish I could remember. I don't want to call out any authors because I'm sure that they have like so many complaints about my books too. But like she meets this guy. She knows he's bad news right off the bat. Like she knows it. And then she meets this other guy. And he's like this normal, not weird shape-shifting creature guy. Well, he is, but it's like she's inexplicably drawn to this other guy who gets her killed, literally killed, and then has to be resurrected. I'm like, so that was really a bad choice. But then there wouldn't be a book if there wasn't that kind of love triangle, I guess. So I mean, it's just I'm sure there's definitely a market for that. It's just not my cup of tea. Like I want my love triangles to be really nuanced and full of angst and make me want to throw the book against the wall when she chooses, because I can't choose between which one. But this that I read was just like he literally got you killed and you still want to be a person. It makes no sense to me. It doesn't make, but I'm 40, so maybe that's just life experience telling me that it sucks for somebody to kill you and then want to still be with them. I don't know.
That's funny. I like for my love triangles to be like nuanced and messy while they're happening. But then I guess I want that feeling of resolution at the end. Like I don't want her the rest of her life to still be laying in bed with regrets and wondering if she made the right choice. So that's a lot to ask of an author to do both. But that's what I want.
I mean, there definitely has to be some sort of catalyst to make the decision. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an earth-shattering type of catalyst, just something that works for the character. Like, you know, even if it's just one tiny little thing, but it is enough for this character to go on, like you said, knowing they picked the right person. Even if when they still think about that other person, it kind of hurts a little bit, but they still know they made it. Like I get you, like you still want to know they made the right choice, but not necessarily happily, gleefully, like.
Yeah, and sometimes that comes just as simple as knowing that the other person is also happy, that they moved on and found happiness, and like you still have love for them, and but you're at peace and they're at peace, and that's okay. You know, like I don't want the messy endings where they're laying in bed like, maybe I should call that person. Maybe I made the yeah.
That it's funny that you say that, because that honestly is almost always what sparks what I want to be a standalone novel into a series. Like
when the other person still isn't happy.
Yes. Like so Snow Kissed. That was meant to be a one and done single. It ended up being 7. I mean, it didn't end up being 7 because of that reason, but there was not a happily ever after for one of the people in the first book. And I was like, that sucks. So I had to write another book, and then another one. So eventually like I do have difficulty with my characters not having their happily ever after if they got their heart broken in the book. Like I'm bad at that. And I think I'm one day gonna have to write a book where I just break everyone's heart so that I can get over that and stop writing series just because I can't stand that my character's not happy. Wait, I did do that. Eiagan's Winter. I did kind of do that, sort of, a little bit. No, I didn't. I didn't at all, did I?
Well, I mean, it depends on if you're taking the book as a book, or if you're like, you know, looking at the series as a whole. I mean, you pretty much, you know, like broke people's hearts and killed everyone. And then you're like, but there's more books. It'll be, you know, well, it'll be fine.
But I do know, like, I'm about to write the third book, and I do know, like, it's not going to be okay for everyone. And that hurts, like, right here, really bad. But I need to do that because if I don't, then I'll just never stop writing the series.
Well, that and there's a little bit of that is just honest. Like, it's real life. And I'm not one to say that, like, fiction always has to be brutally realistic.
Yeah.
I think that escapism is a huge part of why people read, and that
Yeah.
you know that I'm not always a bow neatly tied happy ending writer, but at the same time, I don't want a story that feels unresolved in the way that real life usually does, you know. So and I think that a sense of resolution is important, but that I don't think that you have to give every character a happy ending. Some of my side characters, I just kind of like, off you go. I wish you the best, you know.
Good luck. There might be some people in another book somewhere you can think. Like,
well, and that's the thing. I think I leave open a lot of threads where I could, like with the Stalker series, I ended up writing side stories that covered some of the love interest rejects, and gave them happy endings. The only reason I did that is because readers demanded it. I had not planned to do that. I was just gonna let it be.
I remember that because I remember reading the reject that I wanted and making a comment on it, and other people were like, oh, how could you possibly like this character? He's horrible. He's terrible. Didn't you read the first book? I'm like, I did read the first book, but clearly I am more forgiving than you are with his issues. But yeah, I remember that.
But, and I mean, that's a complicated book to explain without giving spoilers. So, I mean,
that's why I keep pausing. I'm like, oh, I'm saying too much.
Yeah, I sort of had 5 love interests. If, like, for the viewers who may not have read the book, there were sort of 5 love interests in the sense that there were 5 possible people that she thought the secret admirer might be. Not all of them were fully developed, but it was funny because one of the side people that wasn't ever actually a true romantic interest, but that she at one point thought the letters might have been from, he was the one that I got the most demand for. Like the people got mad that it wasn't him, and I had to write a whole side story with like his POV and everything because they wanted to see him get his happy ending. So I had to create some weird side character girl at the zoo for him to be with, right? And I think she was perfect for him. You know, it was meant to be. I actually based her on a friend of mine.
Really?
So yeah, her name is Rachel.
It's funny that I was just saying it's funny that we both do that. That like our love triangle people spur additional books because we need that closure. And that it probably does come from the fact that you don't usually get that kind of closure in life. Like
there's so much left unresolved and so much to explore. I feel like in the Lex Chronicles, because it was an epic fantasy trilogy and I had the space to, I tried to give, at least from my core group of characters, I tried to give like a resolved feeling to each of their situations.
Yeah.
So that I wouldn't then have to go and write a whole new series of books exploring what happened afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think you did really well with that one. Like, and that triangle had a really satisfying resolution, because it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't somebody getting their heart broken. It was just life. It just was what it was. Like, things happen, stuff occurs, and this is what happened, and everybody's okay with it. Like,
yeah,
tension at first before you realize, oh, this is where we're going. Okay, that works. But yeah, I do remember being like a little bit mad at you because it took so long to figure out which way this was going to go. And then, that introduction of that other character that we love, but we won't talk about because spoilers.
I think it's interesting. It might be a little bit of the difference between, pantsers and plotters or whatever. But you kind of use them as an exploration of who your character is. And I'm over here like, I know exactly who she's supposed to be with. But I would adapt if I needed to. So like when I'm writing it, and again, maybe this is more of a statement on my writing method or whatever. I always think I have a plan. I always have a plan. The story sometimes has a different plan. So then I've had to learn that that's just part of my process, that as I'm writing, instead of forcing the story into my plan, if I start feeling the story resisting me and going a different direction, then I have to kind of step back and look at it and maybe allow the story to be right. So I think that I would allow a different ending to the love triangle tension if it's what I really felt like would be what my character would actually do or choose as I got more familiar with her. Like I'm open to changing that as I go. I don't necessarily like lock into that. But I'm usually in my mind kind of planning for it to be a certain person.
I actually, like, it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually did do that in Snowkissed, and without trying to give away too many spoilers, the person that Calla ended up with was not the original person that I had planned for her to end up with. And it just, and I think, you talk about discovery writers sometimes, and I think, pantsers are often, well, that's what they're doing. They're discovering their story as they go. And I might have some sort of usual, like, loose idea of how I want this to go. But as I was writing, like, the tension between Calla and the person she ends up with was so much more connected as I was writing it than the other person that I had originally thought that she would go through all this stuff with. So it just kind of made sense to lean that way. But I guess that brings us right back to which I guess she really was just choosing between which person was more who she was and who she wanted to be. We'll leave that pesky curse out of it for now, but if she had to choose between these two people, waited without anything else, as I was writing the story, it became abundantly clear that this other person was more in tune with her and who she was meant to become versus this other person was more of who she used to be and really can't go back to by the end of the story. So it totally wrecked that love triangle and flipped it to the other direction.
I remember when I read the early alpha draft or beta draft, whatever it was, when I first read Snowkiss, after you had taken it from Wattpad and were like working on it. Mm-hmm. I remember having that like angst, that tension, because I really liked the original person that she was with. I was like, oh, his poor little heart, like what just happened?
And it was brutal too. Like, I did not pull any punches with that. I mean, and it was hard for her. Like, she really did. Like, I've had people ask, like, did she even care about him? Yeah, she really did love this first person. But I think that, sometimes that's not enough. Like, you can love someone. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right person for you. And I was very upset when I had to break his poor little heart, but I think for the story, it was the right way to go.
And he ended up, again, coming back to that idea of like providing resolution. They both ended up at peace, and it was okay.
Yeah, things ended up good for him, and And he took it like such a trooper.
He
Like,
really did. He took it well. He did not go off the wall like Jacob in Twilight.
no.
Like he took it well.
Bella didn't really have a good choice, like, at all. Like, I don't think her I know her good choice was, what was his name at the beginning? Mike, the normal human guy.
Yeah, I think it was Mike.
You should have just gone to prom with Mike and just
But then the whole series would have just stopped there.
Not a story after that. But
and then like Edward would have been this random stalker dude that just follows her around and watches her.
Well, she kind of is anyway. But
well, yeah, but they like that would have been all she knew. Like, this weird guy that just shows up everywhere. Very, very different book.
It would have been yeah, like exactly. I mean, if she had chosen good old human Mike at the beginning, it would have been a book at all.
I've heard a lot of people basically say that like Edward is sort of representing like the dark side, and Jacob is like the safe, like Edward is the dark, dangerous, adventurous life, and Jacob is more like the safe life. But he was a werewolf too, yeah, so it, you know,
no matter which one she picked. I mean, especially since I liked Jacob better than Edward, but
yeah, I was team Edward because I have a soft spot for the like self-tormenting broody types. So
I do too usually, like yeah, like I definitely do too, but in that instance, like obviously I was gonna have to pick between two really bad choices. I thought they were both bad choices, and I can hear people like cursing me when they listen to this video, but like
I know I'm gonna have to put a disclaimer on this.
Yeah.
Of some kind. Like
I think everyone has read Twilight by now, though. If you haven't, then
well, not just for spoilers, but the like, please don't hate us. We, you know, we both read Twilight all the way through, and we appreciate it for the popular series that it is. We're just
and she was a great writer. She hit the like all the right feels and everything. Yeah.
So that's our disclaimer. Don't hate us. She is a talented author and clearly did a lot of things right. Mm-hmm. So don't.
But speaking as an adult who's been there, done that, got the battle scars, like neither one of those was a really good choice. But I just kind of felt like, you know, only one of them didn't stalk her. And I was like, okay. But then he turned around and made it weird by, you know, imprinting on a baby.
Yeah.
A creepy CGI baby to top it off.
Okay, so honestly, had the movies never been made, Renesmee might have been a far less creepy thing in my head than it is now. Because now, having seen the movies, it's taken the creepiness of that whole thing to a whole new level. It was a little creepy when I read the books, because I did read the books before I ever saw the movies.
Yeah, me too.
And it was a little creepy even then, but the movies really took that up a few notches. The creepiness level.
I get where she was going. She was doing what we were talking about, like just trying to resolve this love triangle where everybody.
Yeah, and honestly, she did a decent job with that.
Yeah, because you know everybody else had their person. You know, most of them already had their person from the beginning, except for poor Mike, who never got his person. I don't think he's just still.
He probably found some other normal girl from that high school and moved on. He's okay. He's okay. You write fan fiction about Mike.
I don't have time for fan fiction about Mike. Like
anybody who's watching this video, feel free to write fan fiction about Mike.
And send it to me because I want to know. I want to know what happened to poor Mike. Or whoever, I can't remember the character's name, but Anna Kendrick played her. Like, I really want to know what happened to her. Like, she just, I don't know. She went on to sing a cappella, but.
Yes, see, they exist in a shared universe. Pitch Perfect is what happened after.
Yeah, she went and sang, wiped her memories of vampires and werewolves and things, and I don't know. Truly, honestly, like, Bella should have just gone to her dad and be like, look, Pops, there's some weird stuff going on in Florida, so let's skedaddle. like before.
Okay, so this is something that I know we have planned to talk about in another video, but I think we should at least acknowledge it and mention it here. There are a lot of unhealthy life choices displayed in typical young adult fiction. So
that ties into love triangles too, though, because like
it does. Yeah. So that's something that in our fiction, you and I, we try to be conscious of is what are we advocating to teens who might read these books? Because the happy ending that you give your character is sort of the thematic advice, like choose this and like you get to be happy too, right? It's the implied correct choice for life.
Yeah. And so there's a level of responsibility as the adult to say
there is a level of responsibility. Yeah.
And that's not to say like they're like teenagers are smart. I mean, they're not, you know, not bashing teenagers at all. There's brilliant teenagers out there who make completely reasonable, wise choices all the time. But on the flip side of that, if you have every young adult author that you know is writing these really, really toxic relationships, it'll make you think, okay, well, maybe there are only toxic relationships and I just have to choose the lesser of the two relationships. And
yeah, or maybe even worse is the thought that like this is normal. Like
right. Yeah.
Like this is what love looks like. This is normal.
Yeah. Well, but see, too, on the flip side of that, I have a tendency to write, like some of my characters will just be too, what's the word? I don't want to say perfect, because like I try to write my characters with plenty of flaws, but I also didn't want to project this idea that there's this perfect other person out there for you who's never going to make you mad, who's always going to do the right thing, who's always going to say the right thing, because then that's also setting up for failure. Like you're not going to find that person. You're not going to find someone who never disagrees with you, always supports you, never makes you mad. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So there's that level of responsibility of like finding this middle ground and just, you know, like go back to, you know, love triangles with immortals, like Edward and all that stuff. Like, yeah, oh, it's romantic, it's sweet. You know, she's a vampire now. They can be together forever. Do you have any idea how long forever is? Because after about 250 years of him not putting his socks in the hamper, she's gonna wish she had a steak. Like, I don't know where that came from, but it's like, do you realize that forever is forever? And at some point, you might wish you were still human and could not be in this love triangle where you have to become some immortal demon to be happy. So back to the responsibility of that is, you know, also being realistic. Like, yeah, these two people are vying for your heart right now, but long term, which one is going to stay true to who they're presenting to be?
Yeah.
Often people are going to present their best side when they have competition. So like I just think that, yeah, like the level of responsibility is really, really difficult with a love triangle because you don't want two bad options, you don't want two good options, you want it to be something that's difficult for this person to choose between, but also realistically understand that if you find yourself in the middle of a love triangle, you're probably not being told the complete truth by everyone involved in said love triangle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like, yeah. I get what you're saying.
Like, I've never been in the middle of a love triangle, so there's that. But
I don't think I have either. I gotta think for a second.
If I was, I didn't know it. Well, I mean, I guess that's not necessarily true. If I go back to like high school, I'm sure there was definitely like, you know how high school is. I mean, everybody likes everybody, and then they like somebody different, and then they like somebody different. So there was that. But in my adult, like serious relationship life, I've really heavily avoided having feelings for anybody but one person at a time because it's just not convenient. It's very inconvenient. But yeah. I don't know. Like I know I will keep writing love triangles even though I don't mean to, and they'll be awkward and miserable, and somebody's gonna get their heart broken, and readers are gonna hate me for it. But like like Eiagan's Winter, I don't want to leave spoilers for it because it's still not a resolved situation, but there were, if I can speak to you in code, there were people pulling for this one person, and in beta reads, like people who were beta reading were like, oh, I hope that she stops being so cold towards this person because you can tell he really loves her and he's just sweet and he's strong and he's great and he's perfect. And I'm like, the thing you don't understand is that like she does love him, but because she loves him, she'll never be in a relationship with him because it'll kill him. Like he's gonna die if he's, like this is not a life where, being in this relationship with this person is going to be good for that person. But like this person is different because it's not going to kill them. Like, so sometimes there's that too. Like I haven't I have resolved it in the second book, but there's still this sort of gaping wound that I have to seal over in the third book for people. And if you're not on that team, it's not going to bother. It doesn't bother you at all. But I have some readers who were on that character's team that are still like throwing it in my face, like you didn't put her with such and such, and you didn't do this, and I can't believe it. But at the same time, I kind of get why you didn't. But see, that's the kind of thing I like. Like if I can make you second guess your ship, then my job.
You've done your job well. Yeah.
I've done my job. Look at me. By the time we're done, then I've done my job.
Yeah, I don't know how I would measure whether I did my job well with the love triangle. I guess if the people at the end are like, okay, I mean, yeah, it all worked out. Mm-hmm. I mean, but at the very end, like in the Lex Chronicles, I dragged that thing out for like it was part of the larger arc. So yeah. It wasn't, and especially for some of the side characters, they had their own, like, it wasn't a love triangle, but like Icarius had his own romantic angst happening on the side. And so, yeah. And so I did eventually resolve that. I think readers would have hated me if I didn't, because he was definitely like
I would not have let you release that final book if you had not resolved that situation.
Yes, well, I trust you as my first reader, my alpha reader. Like, you need to fix this.
This is not going to be okay. Like, you're going to have people with pitchforks outside your
so I did resolve his romantic angst eventually, but it was part of the big arc. Along with the event we shall not name that you all nearly killed me for.
But yeah, like as far as the love triangle in that series goes, like you didn't wait to the very, very end to resolve it, but there was enough sort of hangover from that situation where like other stuff's going on. So even though you resolved the love triangle, it still like wasn't okay yet. Like there was other stuff going on. So I couldn't even really revel in the fact that you resolved this love triangle exactly the way that I wanted it to be done. But I was like, yeah, but honestly, it doesn't really matter because everybody might die.
And to be honest, that love triangle was a little hard for me emotionally to write, because not to get too much into like the backstory of how I wrote that series or whatever, but the version that eventually became the published Lex Chronicles was not my original plan for the series. And so the character that Lex ends up with first of all, Lex didn't exist. Like he wasn't my main character. Mm-hmm. And so when I initially started the timeline, it was with Marcus and Jana, and that's all that there was. Mm-hmm. And so when everything changed with the series, and I realized that it was going to end up being one of those, like, you love a person, but then you have to move on. You realize you've both changed and you're moving on. That's sort of like it's a bittersweet thing to have to write, especially because in my head, those memories, those flashback scenes were actual scenes from my original version of the book.
Oh, okay.
So like those were pre-written and I just inserted them in. Those were Marcus. Like they weren't written as flashbacks initially.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
So
yeah, I can see how that would have been a bittersweet sort of.
Yeah, it was like it felt like the right decision for me, but at the same time, it was like it was that true marker that he isn't who he used to be. Like he's moved on.
Yeah.
So it was kind of and it resolved. It was fine for everybody. Like everybody ended up okay.
Yeah.
But it was definitely, you know, it was a challenge to make that decision because for so long in my head, my main character was with this person, right? So it was interesting.
Sometimes the characters that you don't mean to have big roles just sort of end up developing these big roles. Because in going back to Snowkissed, like her friends were never meant to go with her. Like they just weren't. Like why would you take your friend with you on some sort of death mission? Like if you don't have to,
guys.
Yeah, and I think like that's the point where I was starting to realize that this situation that she's found herself in with these people isn't going to work. Like because realistically, the person she used to be, the original person she used to be, would never have done that. Would never have put someone she cared about in danger. And it was just that was the pivotal moment in the book for me when I realized as I was writing it and then rewriting and editing it, I was like, this is not the person she's supposed to be with because she cares more about this other person at this moment when she really should be absolutely terrified for somebody else. Like, does that make sense? Like her natural inclination was not towards that person. Even though she did love him, did care about him, ultimately he was not the one that she would have been devastated if something happened to him. But at the same time, it wouldn't have been the same sort of devastation as if something had happened to the other person.
Yeah.
So it's funny how and even then the character that the first person ends up with in the end, that sort of resolves that triangle and gives everybody the happy ending, wasn't ever going to exist. Like she just wasn't going to exist until I needed her to exist to make it work. And she ended up being sort of pivotal through the rest of the series, even though it was this person who wasn't even supposed to exist who helped me resolve a love triangle that wasn't ever supposed to happen to begin with. Like the dynamics of writing, I guess. But yeah, that's I can't wait until we write our other super secret collaboration and have all the angst and all of the feels and just all of that. Like I already see in our rough draft like some stuff that's going to be needing to be resolved, and it's going to be weird, but it'll be fun too.
Yeah. I still have a lot of the best way I can explain it is blurry places in my side of my character for that collaboration. There's still a lot that I feel like I don't have a good grasp on for her, but I'm sure it'll I've learned that I get clarity as I write the side stories and kind of explore the world. So I'm sure it'll come into focus eventually, but right now I'm like I don't even I planted the love interest already. Like he's there. But I don't, where I'm going with that, I'm still figuring out.
Oh yeah, mine is planted, but she doesn't see him, so it's gonna be, interesting little twist. We'll see, but that'll be fun. I'll be glad when we get to write that. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that one will be fun. There's a lot of topics that we kind of touched on that we're planning to cover in more detail in other videos. So if you guys want to hear us rant about unhealthy relationship dynamics as portrayed in YA fiction, look out for a future video because I'm sure we'll do that one.
We'll definitely hit on that one.
Yeah. So any last thoughts about love triangles? Thank you for joining us for this trope talk about love triangles.
We'll get better. I promise.
Yeah, we will be back another day with a hopefully less rambling trope talk about something else. So
No,
thank you for joining us.
Bye.